Cole Harlan came home from his third deployment on a Tuesday. He expected his daughter to run to the door. She didn't. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a spoon in her hand and a bowl of soup that had gone cold an hour ago. When he walked in, she looked up and her eyes went to Rex first, then to him. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that arrives after a calculation, not before one. And Cole Harlan had been trained for 7 years to know the difference. Hit subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Stay with me until the end. Let's get into it. The thing about coming home from a combat deployment is that nobody tells you the hardest part is not the return. It is the first morning after. When the adrenaline has metabolized and the debrief is done, and the uniform is hanging on the back of the door, and you are standing in your own kitchen at 0630 in civilian clothes that feel like borrowed skin, trying to remember how to be a father. Cole stood at the counter and watched Mara eat breakfast. She was 8 years old, and she had her mother's eyes, dark and attentive, always reading the room. She sat with her back straight and her spoon moving in small, precise circles through her oatmeal, without actually lifting any of it to her mouth. Rex sat on the floor beside her chair, with his chin resting on her knee, and his amber eyes half closed in the specific contentment of a working dog that has found its person and decided to stay there. "You're not eating," Cole said. "I'm not really hungry." "You said that yesterday." Mara looked up at him. That smile again. Measured. "I'll eat more at lunch." He let it go. He told himself it was adjustment. 7 months was a long time to be gone, and she was 8 years old, and she had lost her mother 2 years before that. And adjustment was a reasonable explanation for most things if you needed one badly enough. He poured his coffee and sat across from her and tried to remember what fathers talked about at breakfast tables. "Mrs. Adele says you've been staying up late," he said. "I'm not tired until late." "She says you've been sitting by the window." Mara looked down at her oatmeal. "The neighborhood is quiet at night. I like it." Rex lifted his head from her knee and looked at Cole. The dog did that sometimes, made eye contact at specific moments, as if registering a concern and waiting to see whether the human in the room would catch up. Cole had learned over 3 years of working with Rex that when the dog looked at him like that, it was worth paying attention to. He looked at his daughter. She was still stirring the oatmeal. He said nothing more. Mrs. Adele arrived at 7:30, as she always did. The sound of her key in the front door followed immediately by the warm, familiar smell of the cardigan she had worn every cool morning for as long as Cole could remember. She was 63 years old, and she had been caring for Mara since Claire died, and she was the reason Cole had been able to return to active duty at all. He owed her more than he had ever properly said. She took one look at Mara finishing her breakfast, and her expression did something careful and controlled that Cole clocked immediately. "How was she last night?" he asked quietly, moving into the hallway while Mara carried her bowl to the sink. Mrs. Adele folded her hands in front of her. "She woke up at 2. I heard her moving around. When I checked, she was sitting at the window again." She paused. "Cole, this has been happening most nights since September." "That's 3 months." "Yes." He kept his voice level. "Did she say anything to you about school?" Mrs. Adele looked at him for a moment with a particular expression of someone choosing their words because the unfiltered version would be too much for the moment. "She says school is fine. She says it every time I ask. She says it the same way each time." "What way?" "Like she practiced it." Cole was quiet. In the kitchen, Mara was rinsing her bowl with focused attention, the small sounds of running water filling the silence between them. "I'll talk to her teacher," he said. "I think you should go to the school." I'll call first. Mrs. Adele looked at him. She did not argue. She had learned the shape of his stubbornness well enough to know when pushing would make him dig in, and when to plant something and wait for him to find it himself. "There's something else," she said. She reached into her cardigan pocket and held out a folded slip of paper. "I found this in her jacket yesterday. Inner pocket." Cole unfolded it. The handwriting was adult, neat, and small. It said, "Be good. Don't draw attention. Don't tell your father things that will worry him." He read it twice. Then he read it a third time, because the second time hadn't fully resolved what he was looking at. "Where did this come from?" he said. His voice was even. The evenness was not calm. It was the thing combat training does to a person's voice when the internal system has gone to full alert and is marshaling every resource toward clarity. "I don't know," Mrs. Adele said. "I don't know her handwriting." "But Lily, Cole, that's not something a child writes to herself." He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He called the school that afternoon from his home office, with Rex lying across his feet under the desk. He was connected to Victoria Lorne, Mara's homeroom and lunchroom supervisor, a woman whose phone voice carried the specific warmth of someone who has given this particular performance many times and refined it to near perfection. "Mr. Harlan, I am so glad you called," she said. "Mara is a wonderful child. She's sensitive, which is completely understandable, given everything she's been through, with losing her mother and your deployments. She's adjusting. I give her extra attention during the day because I think she benefits from a consistent adult presence." "What does extra attention look like?" Cole said. "Additional supervision during lunch. Encouraging her to finish her meals, which builds routine and structure. Children who come from disrupted home environments often need stronger boundaries to feel secure." The phrase disrupted home environment landed somewhere specific in Cole's chest and stayed there. "She's not finishing her meals at home either," he said. "That's consistent with what I see at school. She can be resistant, but we're working on it." A brief, warm pause. "I want you to know that I have enormous respect for your service, Mr. Harlan. Mara is in good hands here. I promise you that." He thanked her. He hung up. He sat for a moment with his hands still on the phone. Rex got up from under the desk, walked to the office door, and stood there. Cole looked at the dog. Rex looked back at him, not moving, not lying back down. Cole picked the phone back up and called Mrs. Adele. "I need you to watch everything," he said. "Every morning when you drop her off, every afternoon when you pick her up. What Mara eats, what she says, what she doesn't say. Write it down." "I've been writing it down for 2 months," Mrs. Adele said quietly. "I have a notebook." The weight of that settled through him slowly. 3 days later, an email arrived from someone named Daniel Ray, listed as the school's student counselor. The subject line was, "Follow up on Mara's adjustment." The body of the email read, "Mr. Harlan, I would welcome an in-person conversation about Mara's experience at school at your earliest convenience. I want to be helpful in this process. I am available most mornings before 8. Cole read it 4 times. It was not what it said. It was the architecture of it. The careful, considered distance between the lines. The phrase, "I want to be helpful in this process," which was the language of a man who had something specific to say and was measuring very precisely how much of it he could put in writing. He called the school's main line and asked for Ray directly. Ray answered on the second ring. When Cole identified himself, the counselor's voice went through a brief, barely perceptible adjustment. The sound of a person relieved to be receiving a call they had been hoping would come. "Thank you for reaching out," Ray said. "I prefer to speak in person if that's possible. Is Mara okay?" A silence that lasted 1 second too long. I think you should come to the school, Mr. Harlan. I think it would be valuable for you to see the environment firsthand. When? As soon as you can. Cole looked at Rex, who had come to stand beside his chair with that steady, attentive focus that meant the dog had read something in the room and was waiting. I'll be there Thursday, Cole said. I'm bringing my canine. There was a pause. Of course, Ray said, and his voice, when he said it, carried something that was not quite relief and not quite fear. It was the sound of a man who has been holding a door shut for a long time and has just heard footsteps on the other side. Thursday morning, Cole dressed in his NWU Type 3 working uniform without fully deciding why. The green and brown digital camouflage felt right in a way he did not need to analyze. He clipped Rex's working vest. He called ahead to confirm a community engagement clearance that would allow him and Rex onto the campus without triggering any requirement for advanced staff notice. He drove. In the back seat, Rex sat upright and alert, his amber eyes tracking the road ahead. Cole thought about the note in his pocket. Be good. Don't draw attention. Don't tell your father things that will worry him. He thought about Mara's smile that first morning, the one that had arrived after a calculation. He thought about the oatmeal going cold. He pressed the accelerator and said nothing, and Rex pressed his nose briefly against the back of Cole's headrest, in the specific gesture the dog used when it wanted its handler to know it was present and paying attention and ready. Cole reached back and put one hand on the dog's head for a moment. Then he put it back on the wheel. They were 12 minutes from the school. The school parking lot was half full when Cole pulled in and cut the engine. He sat for a moment. Rex was already standing in the back, his working vest on, his body carrying that particular forward readiness that Cole had come to recognize as the dog's equivalent of a pre-mission state. Not aggression, anticipation. The dog knew something was happening. He always knew before Cole announced it. Okay, Cole said quietly. He got out and opened the rear door, and Rex dropped to the ground beside him, immediately pressing against his left leg in the working position. Cole clipped the short lead, and they walked toward the main entrance together. The front office administrator looked up when they came through the door, and her expression moved through surprise, adjustment, and professional recovery in about 2 seconds flat. Cole was used to that sequence. A man in military camouflage with a German shepherd tends to reorganize a room before he says a word. Petty Officer Harlan, he said. I have a community engagement clearance for this morning. I also have an appointment with Daniel Ray. She checked her screen, nodded. I'll let him know you're here. Can I ask about the dog? He's a certified working canine. He's cleared for campus access. It's on the community engagement form. She looked at Rex. Rex looked back at her with those amber eyes, perfectly still, completely non-threatening, utterly unreadable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. She nodded again and picked up her phone. Daniel Ray appeared from the hallway 2 minutes later. He was a slight man in his late 30s, with the careful, measured movements of someone who had learned to make himself small in certain company. He shook Cole's hand, and his grip was firm, but his eyes were doing something that Cole categorized immediately. Relief and anxiety, running simultaneously, like two programs fighting for the same processor. Thank you for coming, Ray said. He looked at Rex briefly. Something in his face shifted. Can we talk in my office first? Yes. They moved down the corridor. Rex walked precisely at Cole's heel, his nails quiet on the floor, his head tracking smoothly as they passed classroom doors. Ray closed his office door and sat behind his desk, and then immediately stood back up again, as if the chair hadn't felt right. He moved to the window, turned back. Cole waited. I need you to understand something before I say anything else, Ray said. I don't have documented proof of everything I'm about to tell you. What I have is 3 months of observation, 2 written concerns that were filed with administration and never formally acknowledged, and the accounts of 2 cafeteria workers who are afraid of losing their jobs." He stopped. "I have a daughter myself. She's 6. I kept asking myself what I would want someone to do if it were her. That's why I sent the email." "Tell me," Cole said. Ray looked at him. Then he sat down and he told him. He talked for 11 minutes. Cole did not interrupt once. The picture that assembled itself was not sudden. It was incremental, the way structural damage works, invisible at the joints until the load gets applied. Victoria Lorne had been managing Mara's lunch for the past 10 weeks, under the designation of nutritional supervision, a term she had introduced to the cafeteria staff as a specialized intervention for students with eating irregularities. It sounded clinical. It sounded caring. It gave her unilateral authority over what Mara ate, when she ate, and where she sat. Mara had been moved to a corner table, isolated from her classmates, for the last 6 weeks. The food on her tray was not always fresh. Ray had personally witnessed, on 2 occasions, Lorne removing portions from other students' unfinished trays and adding them to Mara's. When a cafeteria worker had raised a quiet objection, Lorne had reminded her that Mara's father was a deployed serviceman, and the child needed discipline and structure that a consistent adult authority figure could provide in his absence. The worker had not objected again. Cole's jaw tightened once while Ray was talking. Just once. The rest of his face was still. "The note," Cole said when Ray finished. He pulled the folded slip of paper from his breast pocket and put it on the desk. "You've seen this handwriting before." Ray looked at it. Something moved through his expression. "She gives them notes. I've seen Mara with paper in her hand after lunch on at least 3 occasions. I didn't know what was on them." He looked up. "I should have asked." "You're asking now," Cole said. He folded the note and put it back. "What does administration know?" "The principal is aware that I filed 2 written observations. She met with Lorne after the first one." Lorne reframed the entire situation as me overstepping my counseling role and interfering with classroom management. He paused. "The principal believes her. Lorne has been here 9 years. She runs the parent fundraising committee. She has credibility I don't have." Cole was quiet for a moment. "Is there anything on camera?" "The cafeteria has 2 ceiling cameras. I don't have access to the footage." "The cafeteria workers who talked to you, would they talk to me?" Ray hesitated. "One of them might. Her name is Janet. She's been here 12 years. She was visibly upset when she told me what she'd seen, but she backed off when I suggested going to the principal. She said she had a mortgage and 2 kids in high school." He met Cole's eyes. "She's not a coward. She's just afraid." "I understand afraid," Cole said. "I'll talk to her." He stood up. Rex rose immediately beside him. "There's one more thing," Ray said quickly. Cole turned. Ray was looking at his desk, his hands flat on the surface. Lorne had a complaint filed against her at her previous school. A parent alleged she had singled out a child from a single-parent household for what the complaint described as targeted humiliation during meals. The complaint was reviewed and dismissed. The file was closed. He looked up. "I only found this because I have a contact in the district office who owed me a favor. It's not public record. I don't know how it was closed or who closed it." Cole stood very still. Rex pressed against his leg. "Thank you," Cole said. His voice was level and quiet, and contained something underneath it that Ray could hear but not name. The specific compression of a man who has taken a full assessment of a situation and is now organizing everything he has toward a single point of action. He left the office and moved down the corridor toward the cafeteria wing, with Rex at his heel. He had not intended to go there yet. He had intended to find Janet first, talk to her somewhere private, build the evidentiary picture before he walked into the room. That was the trained approach. Establish your intelligence before you make contact. Know the terrain. Control the variables. He was 30 feet from the cafeteria when Rex stopped. Not a gradual slow. A full stop. Both front paws planted, body rigid, head oriented toward the cafeteria doors with an intensity Cole had seen maybe a dozen times in 3 years of working together. Cole stopped with him. "What is it?" he said quietly. Rex did not move. His ears were forward. His focus was absolute. Cole looked at the dog for 2 seconds, then looked at the cafeteria doors. The sounds coming through them were ordinary. Trays, voices, the low institutional noise of a school lunch period. Nothing that should have triggered Rex's full alert posture. But Cole had learned, with a specificity that had been purchased at considerable cost, that Rex's full alert posture was not triggered by sound. It was triggered by the dog's reading of a situation's emotional texture. He had seen Rex stop dead outside a building in Bahrain that looked and sounded completely normal, and the 2 men inside it had been anything but. Cole pushed the cafeteria door open. The noise of the room came through fully now, chairs and trays and voices, and Cole scanned left to right in the practiced way, reading the room for its shape and its anomalies. He found Mara in 4 seconds. She was at a corner table by herself, the nearest other student a full table away, positioned with her back to the wall, in the specific posture of a child who has learned to make herself as small as possible in a large room. Her tray was in front of her. Cole could see from the door that the food on it was wrong. Not in its content, but in its temperature, the particular flat stillness of food that has been sitting too long. Victoria Lorne stood at the serving counter on the far side of the room. As Cole watched, Lorne picked up a ladle and walked toward Mara's table, carrying a small bowl. She set it down on the tray without speaking, then leaned down and said something close to Mara's ear. Mara's shoulders drew inward. Not a flinch. The practiced, preemptive contraction of a child who has learned to make herself smaller before the moment arrives, rather than in response to it. Cole was moving before the thought fully completed. Rex moved with him, perfectly in step, no command needed. A cafeteria worker near the serving line looked up and went still. 2 students at a nearby table turned. The noise in the room did not stop all at once. It dropped in stages, table by table, as people registered the figure in military camouflage, moving with direct purpose through the center of the room. Lorne straightened and turned and saw him. Her face did the sequence Cole had watched for years in people who have been operating without accountability and have just registered that the accounting has arrived. The smile came up first, professional and warm, the practiced expression of a woman who has talked her way out of every previous version of this moment. Then it registered that he was not stopping, that he was not smiling back, that the dog at his heel was not looking at her with the friendly curiosity of a community engagement visit, but with the same direct, focused attention as the man on the other end of the leash. The smile held for approximately 2 more seconds. Then it didn't. Cole reached Mara's table and looked at the tray. He looked at the food on it. He looked at the bowl Lorne had just added, its contents cold and mixed in the specific way that happens when you combine things from separate sources. He had been in enough austere environments to know what food that has been assembled from other people's leftovers looks like. He looked at his daughter. Mara was looking up at him. Her eyes were wide and her lower lip was pressed tight, and she was holding very still in the way children hold still when they are trying to determine whether what is happening is safe. He sat down beside her. Not across. Beside. He put one hand on her back and felt her breathe in sharply at the contact, then release it slowly, like something that had been wound very tight was unwinding one careful coil at a time. "Hi, Bug," he said. Her voice came out small. "Hi, Dad." He kept his hand on her back. He did not look at Lorne yet. He was looking at his daughter. Rex sat down on Mara's other side and put his chin on the table beside her tray and looked at her with those amber eyes, steady and warm, and Mara reached out, without looking, and put her small hand on top of the dog's head and held it there. Then Cole looked at the tray one more time. He reached out, picked it up, and set it aside. The sound of the tray hitting the table carried across the room. The last remaining noise died. Every person in the cafeteria was watching. 3 cafeteria workers at the serving counter had gone completely still. 2 teachers near the door had stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Cole looked at Victoria Lorne. She opened her mouth. He spoke first. His voice was not loud. It carried anyway, with a particular quality of a voice that does not need volume to reach every corner of a room. "Don't," he said. The word landed in the cafeteria the way a single sound can sometimes land in a room that has gone completely quiet. Not loud, but absolute. Lorne closed her mouth. For 3 full seconds, nobody in the cafeteria moved. Not the cafeteria workers at the serving counter. Not the 2 teachers by the door. Not the students at the tables, whose lunch period had just become something none of them had a name for yet. The only movement in the room was Rex, who shifted his weight slightly and pressed his side more firmly against Mara's chair. Then Lorne recalibrated. Cole watched it happen. He had watched people do it in interrogation rooms and in field negotiations, and in the particular social theater of military command structures. The initial exposure passes. The professional mask reassembles itself, and the person decides on their approach. With Lorne, it took 4 seconds, and then she smiled. And the smile was so practiced and so warm that Cole understood immediately why it had worked for as long as it had. "Mr. Harlan," she said, her voice carrying the measured concern of someone addressing a misunderstanding with patience. "I am so glad you came to visit. Mara talks about you all the time." Cole looked at her. He did not respond. "I know this looks unusual, the separate seating, the supervised meals, but I want to explain the thinking behind it, because I think once you understand the approach, you'll see that everything here has Mara's best interest at its foundation." Cole stood up slowly. He kept one hand on Mara's shoulder. "Stay here with Rex," he said to his daughter, his voice low and direct. Mara nodded, her hand still on Rex's head, her eyes tracking her father with the focused attention of a child who has learned to read adult situations for threat indicators. He stepped away from the table and moved toward Lorne. He stopped 4 feet from her, close enough to be a conversation, far enough to give her the room she needed to make her next choice clearly. 11 weeks, he said. Lorne held her smile. "I'm sorry?" 11 weeks of nutritional supervision, isolated seating, notes in her jacket pocket telling her not to tell me things. He paused. 11 weeks. The smile adjusted, slightly. "The notes are part of a self-regulation program I developed to help children manage their emotional responses during the school day. They're reminders, not instructions. And the supervised seating is simply structure, which children from disrupted home situations often need more of, not less." The phrase again. Disrupted home situation. Cole noted it the same way he noted things in the field, without reaction, without letting the notation show on his face, filing it in the specific place where he kept information that would be needed later. "Janet," Cole said, without looking away from Lorne. Behind the serving counter, a woman in her late 40s went very still, "Janet," Cole said again, this time turning his head toward her. "I'd like to speak with you." Lauren stepped sideways, subtly positioning herself.
"The cafeteria staff aren't available during service hours, Mr. Harlan. I'm sure you understand."
"Janet," Cole said a third time, not louder, steadier. The cafeteria worker looked at Lauren. Then she looked at Cole. Then she set down the ladle she was holding and walked around the counter and stood in the space between them, her hands clasped in front of her, her jaw set in the expression of a woman who has been afraid for a long time and has just made a decision about it. "I've been here 12 years, Janet said, and her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. "I have never once filed a complaint about a staff member." She looked at Lauren directly. "I should have. 2 months ago, I should have." Lauren's expression shifted for the first time. Not dramatically. A tightening. The specific tightening of someone watching a structure they built carefully, beginning to develop cracks from a direction they had not fully accounted for. "I don't think this is the appropriate venue for this conversation," Lauren said. Her voice had lost one layer of its warmth. Just one. But Cole caught it. "She poured food from another child's tray onto Mara's," Janet said. She was looking at Cole now, not at Lauren. The way a person looks at the one person in a room they have decided to trust. Cold food. Leftover food. She told Mara to eat it because waste is disrespectful, and children in military families need to understand sacrifice. Janet stopped. Her voice stayed even. Mara ate 3 bites, and then she stopped, and Miss Lauren told her she would sit there until she finished. Mara sat there for 40 minutes. She was late to afternoon class. Janet's hands tightened against each other. "I wanted to say something. I picked up the phone twice. I put it back down twice." She looked at Mara's table where the little girl sat with her hand on Rex. "I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." Lauren turned to the principal, who had appeared in the cafeteria doorway, drawn by the unusual stillness of a room that should have been loud. She was a woman in her mid-50s named Alderman, who wore the permanent expression of someone managing more variables than she had originally agreed to manage. "Principal Alderman," Lauren said, and her voice had recovered some of its authority. "Mr. Harlan has entered the cafeteria during service hours without coordinating through administration. He is questioning staff and creating an atmosphere that I think we can all agree is not appropriate for the children present." Alderman looked at Lauren. Then she looked at Cole. Then she looked at Mara, sitting alone at a corner table with a military working dog pressed against her side and a tray of cold food pushed to the edge of the table. And something moved through her face that Cole read as a principal who had just been forced to see the full picture of a situation she had been allowing herself to see only partially. "My office," Alderman said. "Everyone." "I'd like my daughter to come with me," Cole said. "Of course." Cole went back to Mara's table. He crouched down in front of her. She was looking at him with those dark eyes that were so completely her mother's that for a moment the specific grief of that hit him somewhere behind the sternum, where he usually kept it contained. "You're not in trouble," he said. "Nothing that happened here is your fault. I need you to understand that right now." Mara's lower lip moved. "She said you would be upset with me if I told you." The sentence went through him like something with an edge. "Mara," he kept his voice steady. "Look at me." She looked. "I am not upset with you. I am never going to be upset with you for telling me the truth, about anything, ever." He held her gaze. "Do you believe me?" She studied him for a moment, with the careful, measuring attention of a child who has learned that adult promises require verification. Then she nodded, small but real. "Okay." He stood up and held out his hand, and she took it. And Rex rose beside her, and the 3 of them walked across the cafeteria toward the door where Principal Alderman was waiting. Lauren fell into step behind them. In Alderman's office, the arrangement of the room told its own story. Alderman sat behind her desk. Cole sat across from her, with Mara on the chair beside him, Rex sitting at the girl's feet. Lorne stood near the door, which was the position of someone who had been in this office many times before, in the dominant position, and was finding the current geometry unfamiliar. Ray appeared in the doorway, and Alderman waved him in. He sat near the window. He did not look at Lorne. "Mr. Harlan," Alderman began, "I want to assure you that student welfare is the absolute priority of this school, and if there have been any practices that fell short of that standard, I take full responsibility for ensuring they are corrected immediately." "I'm not here for assurances," Cole said. "I'm here for information and accountability." He reached into his breast pocket and placed the note on Alderman's desk. "This was found in my daughter's jacket. I need to know who wrote it, and I need to know why my 8-year-old daughter was given written instructions not to tell her father things." Alderman picked it up. Her face tightened. Lorne spoke from near the door. "That is a self-regulation tool that I adapted from a behavioral management program. The intention is to help children develop internal coping frameworks, rather than externalizing every small difficulty to parents, which can create anxiety dependency." The room was quiet. Ray said, from his chair by the window, "I filed 2 written observations with this office in September and October, documenting concerns about Mara's supervised lunch arrangements." He kept his voice neutral and precise. "Both were reviewed and closed without a formal finding. I'd like those files reopened." Alderman looked at Ray, then at Lorne, then at the note in her hand. Lorne straightened. "Daniel has had difficulty understanding the distinction between counseling oversight and classroom management since he arrived at this school. His observations reflected a fundamental misreading of the program's purpose." "The program," Cole said. Lorne turned to him. "Yes, a structured intervention for students who exhibit mealtime resistance and emotional dysregulation. Mara was identified in September as benefiting from this approach." "Who authorized it?" A pause. "I implemented it within my supervisory authority." "Did you notify me?" "Parents are typically informed at the 60-day mark if the intervention continues beyond the initial assessment period." Cole looked at her. "She has been in your program for 11 weeks. Lorne said nothing. "Your previous school," Cole said. The temperature in the room changed. Lorne went still in a way that was different from her previous stillness. The professional composure was there, but something underneath it had shifted. A recalibration of a deeper kind. The recognition that the person across from her had done more preparation than she had credited him for. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said. "A complaint was filed. A child from a single-parent household. Targeted mealtime interventions." Cole kept his voice level. "The file was closed. I want to know how." Alderman set the note down on her desk very carefully. She looked at Lorne with an expression that had moved entirely away from administrative neutrality into something personal and direct. "Victoria," she said, "I need you to wait outside." Lorne looked at her. For a moment, the mask came fully down, and what was underneath it was not the composure Cole had been watching for the last 30 minutes, but something smaller and colder. The expression of a person calculating the remaining options and finding them reduced to a number she had not anticipated. She walked out. The door closed. Alderman looked at Cole. "Tell me what you know," she said. "All of it." And Cole told her. He spoke for 8 minutes and did not stop once, and Mara sat beside him holding Rex's working vest with both hands, and the only sound in the office other than Cole's voice was the dog's quiet breathing and the clock on the wall, and somewhere outside, children on a playground who had no idea that in this room the truth was finally taking up all the space it had been owed for 11 weeks. When Cole finished, Alderman was quiet for a long time. Then she picked up her phone. "Get me the district office," she said, "and pull the camera footage from the cafeteria. All of it. September through today." She paused. "No, I'll wait." Cole looked at his daughter. Mara was looking at Rex. Her hand had moved from his vest to the side of his face, her small fingers gentle against his jaw. And Rex had turned his head slightly into her palm, in the way he did when he was offering something that working dogs were not officially trained to provide, but provided anyway because they were made of better material than most official programs accounted for. Cole watched his daughter breathe, in and out, slow and steadier than it had been an hour ago. He thought about 11 weeks. He thought about cold food and corner tables and small notes in jacket pockets, and a little girl sitting at a window at 2 a.m, waiting for something she could not name. He thought about the note. "Don't tell your father things that will worry him." His daughter had been protecting him. An 8-year-old child, alone in a school cafeteria, had been absorbing what was being done to her and folding it inward because someone had told her that telling him would be a burden to him. And she had believed it, because she was 8 and she loved him, and she did not want to add to what she imagined his life already carried. He reached over and put his hand on her back. She leaned into it without looking up. Outside Alderman's office, down the corridor, he could hear Lorne's heels on the tile floor. Back and forth, back and forth. The specific pacing of someone who has run out of rooms to manage and is standing in the last available space, trying to find a version of events that still holds together. It didn't hold together. He was going to make sure of that. The district office put Alderman on hold for 4 minutes. Cole used those 4 minutes to take Mara to the small waiting area outside the office, where a couch sat against the wall, and a low table held a bowl of individually wrapped crackers that nobody had touched. He sat her down, and Rex positioned himself immediately at her feet, as if the dog had been briefed on the assignment and had accepted it without reservation. "Are you hungry?" Cole asked. Mara looked at the crackers. Something crossed her face that was not quite permission and not quite trust, more like a door that had been kept closed for a long time, being tried from the inside for the first time. She reached out and took 2 crackers and held them in her lap. "You can eat them," Cole said. She looked at him. "I'm allowed?" The question was so small, so precise, the product of 11 weeks of being told that eating was conditional, that hunger required authorization, that the simple animal act of feeding yourself was something a child had to earn from an adult who controlled the terms. Cole sat down beside her. His voice was even. "You are always allowed to eat when you're hungry. Nobody gets to change that. Not here, not anywhere. You understand me?" She nodded. She ate the crackers, both of them, then reached for 2 more. And he watched her do it and kept his face neutral, even though something inside him was burning with a specific, focused heat that he had learned in his early 20s to keep below the surface, because men who let that heat show in the wrong moment made mistakes that cost other people. He was not going to make mistakes today. He went back into the office when Alderman's call connected. She was on her feet behind the desk, her posture carrying a different quality than it had 30 minutes ago. The administrative caution was still there, but the willingness to manage the situation quietly was gone. Cole had watched the moment it went. It was when she looked at the cafeteria footage on her laptop screen, the first 30 seconds of it, and her expression had done something that was not professional at all. She had turned the laptop away from him without explaining why, but he had seen enough. The call with the district office lasted 9 minutes. When it ended, Alderman set the phone down and stood with both hands flat on her desk. "They're sending a compliance officer this afternoon," she said. "The footage is being flagged and secured as of now. No staff member is permitted to delete, copy, or access it." She looked at Cole. Victoria Lorne has been placed on immediate administrative leave, pending investigation. She will not be permitted on school property. Her previous school, Cole said. Alderman's jaw tightened.
I called the district HR director directly while you were outside. The complaint you referenced was filed 18 months ago. It was reviewed by a district liaison who classified it as a personnel management disagreement rather than a welfare concern. The file was closed at that level. It never reached the compliance office. She stopped. The district liaison who reviewed it was Victoria Lorne's brother-in-law. The room was quiet. Ray, still in his chair by the window, exhaled slowly through his nose. The sound of a man who has suspected something for a long time and has just had the architecture of it confirmed. Cole said nothing for a moment. He looked at the wall above Alderman's head. He was doing the specific calculation that he did before every operation, not of risk, but of sequence. What came first? What came after? What could not be undone if done in the wrong order? I need the names of every staff member who witnessed anything in that cafeteria and said nothing, he said. Not for punishment, for testimony. Alderman nodded. I'll compile it. I need Ray's 2 filed observations formally reopened and entered into the district compliance investigation. Done. And I need the contact information for the family from the previous school. Alderman looked at him. I don't have that. The district HR director does. A pause. I'll ask. Cole stood. I'm taking Mara to the hospital now. She needs a full medical evaluation. I'm going to ask the attending physician to document everything they find. He picked up his cover from the chair beside him and held it in his hand. This afternoon, I'm filing a formal complaint with the police. I'd appreciate it if the school's cooperation with that process was complete and immediate. It will be, Alderman said. Her voice had something in it that Cole recognized from the rare moments in a mission debrief when a commanding officer has realized that the intelligence failure was their own. Not shame, exactly. The specific weight of responsibility acknowledged too late and now being carried at full cost. I should have looked closer, Alderman said. She was not making an excuse. She was stating a fact. Cole looked at her. Yes, he said. You should have. He paused. You're looking now. That matters. Make sure it counts. He left the office. In the waiting area, Mara had finished the crackers and was sitting with her legs folded under her on the couch, one hand resting on Rex's back. The dog was leaning against her side with the patient, anchored quality he carried when he had decided that staying was the job and nothing else was required. Mara looked up when Cole came out. Are we leaving? We're going to the doctor. She went still. Am I sick? He sat beside her. I want a doctor to make sure you're okay, that's all. It's not a punishment. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's because I want someone to check that you're all right and tell me what you need. He held her gaze. That's what fathers do. Something in her face shifted. A small, specific release. The kind that happens when a child has been carrying the belief that they are responsible for managing adult concern and is given permission, for the first time in a long time, to simply be the child. She reached out and took his hand. He felt her small fingers close around 2 of his, and he held them carefully, the way you hold something you almost lost without knowing it was in danger. They walked out of the school together, Rex on Cole's left, Mara on his right, holding his hand. At the front entrance, 2 teachers stood near the door and watched them pass, and neither one said anything, and Cole did not look at them, because he did not trust what his face would show if he did. The hospital visit lasted 2.5 hours. The pediatric attending was a woman named Dr. Finch, who had the particular professional warmth
of someone who has spent years communicating difficult findings to parents and has learned to do it with clarity and without cruelty. She examined Mara thoroughly, and when she came to speak with Cole in the hallway, she carried a tablet with the lab results already loaded. "She is malnourished," Dr. Finch said. "Not severely, but meaningfully. She has lost weight over approximately a 10 to 12-week period. She has early markers for a stress-induced gastric condition, which, in plain terms, means her stomach has been producing excess acid in response to prolonged anxiety. She also shows disrupted sleep markers, consistent with chronic low-grade stress." She paused. "Mr. Harlan, this pattern does not develop overnight. It develops when a child is experiencing sustained, repeated stressors that they are not able to disclose or escape from." Cole kept his face still. "Will she recover?" "Fully, with proper nutrition, sleep support, and the removal of the stressor. Children are resilient. The physical damage here is real, but it is not permanent." Dr. Finch looked at him steadily. "What caused this?" He told her. He was concise and he was specific, and Dr. Finch listened without interrupting, her expression moving through the sequence of a professional, receiving information that confirms a clinical picture with a human source. The convergence of data and story that produces not satisfaction, but the specific gravity of understanding. "I'll document everything I found today in formal clinical language," she said when he finished. "If a police report is being filed, I can provide a letter specifying that the findings are consistent with the timeline and nature of the treatment you've described. That letter will carry evidentiary weight." She looked at him. "Do you want me to prepare it today?" "Yes." She went back inside. Cole stood in the hallway for a moment, with his back against the wall. Rex sat beside him and pressed his flank against Cole's leg, and Cole put one hand on the dog's head and just stood there for a full 30 seconds, not thinking, not planning, just standing inside the moment and letting it be exactly as heavy as it was. He had been in situations where things went wrong. In his professional life, that meant people died, and you rebuilt from the loss, and you carried the weight of the decisions, and you moved forward, because the mission required it. He knew how to do that. He had done it. He did not have a protocol for this. For standing in a hospital hallway, knowing that for 11 weeks, his daughter had been sitting in a corner of a cafeteria, eating cold leftover food, and sleeping 3 hours a night, and writing notes in her jacket pocket that said, "I'm not hungry," because a woman had taught her that hunger was something to be ashamed of. And he had been home for 3 weeks of those 11, and had seen the signs, and had accepted the explanations, and had not walked through the right door until today. Rex looked up at him. Cole exhaled. "I know," he said quietly. He called his lawyer from the hallway. He sent the note, photographed on his phone, as an attachment. He described the cafeteria footage aldermen have accessed, and provided the school's district contact. He listed Janet's name and Ray's name as witnesses who had indicated willingness to cooperate. He referenced the previous school and the family there whose complaint had been buried. His lawyer said, "This is a solid case. When do you want to move?" "Today," Cole said. "File everything today." He called Mrs. Adele next. She answered on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. "She's okay," he said first, because he knew that was what she needed to hear. "She's going to be okay. But I need you to write down everything you've observed since September. Every morning she didn't eat. Every night she woke up. Every time she said she was fine in that way you described." He paused. "All of it, Adele. Every single thing." Mrs. Adele's voice on the other end was very quiet. "I have it," she said. "I have all of it. I've been writing it down every night since October, because I didn't know what else I could do." A brief silence. "Cole, I tried to tell you."
"I know," he said. "I know you did." Another silence. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have listened the first time." Mrs. Adele made a sound that was not quite crying, and not quite not. "Just bring her home," she said. "That's all. Just bring her home." When Cole went back into the examination room, Mara was sitting on the table with a warm blanket across her lap that one of the nurses had brought. And she was eating a small cup of applesauce with the careful, tentative focus of a child rediscovering something she had been taught to be suspicious of. She looked up when he came in. "The doctor says I need to eat more," she said. "The doctor is right." Mara looked down at the applesauce. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I didn't tell you because she said it would make things harder for you. She said you had enough to carry." Cole pulled a chair close to the table and sat down so that his eyes were level with hers. "Mara, listen to me carefully. There is nothing you could tell me that would be too much for me to carry. Nothing. You are 8 years old. The only job you have is to be 8 years old. My job is everything else." He held her gaze. "You never have to protect me from the truth. Not now. Not when you're 15. Not when you're 30. That is not your job. That will never be your job." Mara's chin moved. One tear came down. Just one. The kind that escapes before a person can stop it. Rex, sitting beside the examination table, put his nose against her knee. She looked down at the dog and back up at her father and said, in a voice that was small but was not afraid, "Okay, Dad." He nodded. He picked up the applesauce cup from her hands and held it while she took the next spoonful. Outside, his lawyer was filing the paperwork. The cafeteria footage was locked in the district server. Janet was writing her statement at a table in the school break room, with Ray sitting across from her. Both of them finally saying out loud the things they had been carrying in silence for 11 weeks. And Victoria Lorne was sitting in her car in the school parking lot with her phone in her hand, the screen showing 3 unanswered calls from her lawyer and 1 from her brother-in-law. And for the first time in a very long career of managing situations from a position of protected authority, she had run out of people to call who could make this go away. The police report was filed at 4:47 that afternoon. Cole sat across from a detective named Sorrento, who had the patient, unhurried quality of someone who had been doing this job long enough to know that the most important thing he could do in the first 30 minutes was simply listen. He listened well. He did not interrupt. He did not offer reassurances or qualifications. He wrote and he listened. And when Cole finished, he looked at his notes for a moment, and then looked up. "The cafeteria footage," Sorrento said. "The district office is holding it." "Yes, the compliance officer arrived at the school at 2:15. The footage is secured under district protocol, pending the investigation. I'll need a formal request to the district for release. That takes 48 hours minimum under standard procedure." He paused. "Unless the district volunteers it." Principal Alderman indicated full cooperation. "Then we'll have it by tomorrow morning." Sorrento capped his pen. "Mr. Harlan, I want you to understand what the evidentiary picture looks like from where I'm sitting. You have clinical documentation from a pediatric physician, 2 eyewitness staff accounts, written physical evidence in the form of the notes, a documented prior complaint with a traceable conflict of interest in its dismissal, and cafeteria footage that your principal has already reviewed and flagged as significant." He set his notepad down. "This is not a thin case. This is a case." Cole nodded once. "The prior school complaint and the family there," Sorrento said. "If we can locate them, and if they're willing to speak, that establishes a pattern. Pattern changes the charge profile significantly. My lawyer is working on contact information through the district HR office." "Good. Sorrento stood and extended his hand. "I'll be in touch by 9 tomorrow morning." Cole shook it and walked out into the late afternoon with Rex at his heel and the specific exhaustion of a day that had required every resource he had. Not the physical exhaustion of a mission, but the deeper kind that comes from sustained emotional precision. From holding yourself together at the exact right tension for hours, so that the people around you who needed you steady could be unsteady without the whole structure collapsing. He sat in his car for a moment without starting it. Rex put his chin on the center console. Cole looked at the dog. "We're not done," he said. "But we're close." Rex's tail moved once. He drove home. Mara was asleep on the couch when he came through the door, her shoes still on, one hand tucked under her cheek and the other resting on the old stuffed bear she had carried since she was 3. Mrs. Adele was in the kitchen, and she turned when she heard him come in, and they stood looking at each other across the hallway for a moment without speaking, the way two people look at each other when they have both been through something, and neither one needs to narrate it. "She ate dinner," Mrs. Adele said quietly. "Real dinner. She asked for seconds." Cole closed his eyes briefly, opened them. "Good." "She told me what happened at the school." Mrs. Adele's voice was steady, but there was a heat underneath it, controlled and specific. The heat of a woman who had loved a child for 2 years and had spent 3 months watching something wrong happen and not been able to stop it. She said Rex sat next to her the whole time in the principal's office, and she kept her hand on him, and it made her feel safe. Cole looked at Rex, who had moved to the couch and was standing beside the sleeping Mara, with a quiet watchfulness of a dog that has decided where it needs to be and has no intention of moving. "He's good at that," Cole said. He went upstairs and showered and changed and came back down and sat in the armchair across from the couch and just watched his daughter sleep for a while. He did not read. He did not check his phone. He sat with the specific, full-weight presence of a man who has understood, at considerable cost, what presence actually requires. At 8:15, Mara stirred. She opened her eyes and saw him, and for a half-second her body went through the reflexive small tensing that it had learned over 11 weeks of mornings that began with the knowledge of what school would bring. Then she saw where she was. She saw Rex. She saw her father sitting across from her in the lamplight of their own living room. The tension left her body all at once, like a breath released. "You stayed," she said. Her voice was still slow with sleep. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Do you promise?" He had made that promise before in different forms, and had meant it each time, and had been pulled away each time by the machinery of service and duty and the commitments that a uniform carries. He knew the cost of the promise. He made it anyway, because some promises are not about certainty. They are about direction. "I promise," he said. She settled back against the couch cushion and looked at the ceiling. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I knew you would come. I just didn't know when." She paused. "I kept thinking, when he finds out, he'll fix it. I just had to wait." The sentence moved through him slowly, finding all the places where it fit and all the places where it hurt. "You shouldn't have had to wait," he said. "That's on me." "You were far away." "I was far away," he agreed. "I'm going to fix that, too." She turned her head and looked at him with those dark eyes. "How?" "I put in for a compassionate reassignment this afternoon. Stateside posting. I'll be home." He held her gaze. Every morning, every dinner, every night. Mara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in the voice of a child doing honest arithmetic, "You're not going to miss it? Going away?" Cole thought about that. He thought about it honestly, the way he tried to do most things. "Some parts," he said.
But not more than I'll miss you if I'm gone. And I've been doing that math wrong for too long." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she sat up, crossed the space between the couch and the armchair, and climbed into his lap with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who has just been given back the certainty that she is allowed to do exactly this. He put his arms around her, and she leaned back against his chest, and Rex jumped up onto the chair arm and settled there with his big head resting across both of them. And the three of them stayed like that in the lamplight, while the house settled around them into the quiet of a Thursday evening that felt, for the first time in a very long time, like what a home is supposed to feel like. The investigation moved faster than Cole had expected. Sorrento called at 8:40 the next morning. The cafeteria footage had been released voluntarily by the district within the hour after the formal request, a turnaround that Sorrento said was the fastest he had seen from a school district in 11 years. The footage covered 6 separate incidents across 9 weeks. In 4 of them, the documentation was unambiguous. In 2 of them, it was, in Sorrento's precise language, very difficult to watch. The family from the previous school was located within 4 days. A single mother named Grace Teller, whose son had been in Lauren's class 2 years before. She had filed her complaint and watched it disappear, and had eventually moved her son to a different school and tried to put it behind her. When Cole's lawyer called her, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "I wondered if it would happen again. I wondered if I should have pushed harder." Cole's lawyer told her she could still push. She said, "Tell me what to do." She testified. Lauren's brother-in-law, the district liaison who had buried the first complaint, resigned from his position 11 days into the investigation. His resignation letter cited personal reasons. The district announced a formal review of his case files covering the previous 4 years. The criminal charges filed against Victoria Lorne included child abuse, emotional maltreatment, and misuse of professional authority. Her teaching license was suspended immediately and permanently revoked 30 days later, following the licensing board's review of the full investigative record. At her arraignment, she appeared with 2 lawyers and said nothing for the camera. Her face, Cole thought, when he saw the brief news footage, looked exactly like the face of a person who has spent a career believing that the right connections and the right language could make any situation manageable, and has discovered, too late and all at once, that the calculation was wrong. He did not attend the hearing. He was at Mara's school that morning, the new school, 3 miles closer to their house, where Mara had started the previous week, and where her homeroom teacher was a young woman named Ms. Park, who had contacted Cole before Mara's first day and said, "I've been briefed on what happened. I want you to know my door is open to you any time, without advance notice, for any reason." He stood in the hallway outside the lunchroom at noon, Rex beside him, and watched through the window as Mara carried her tray to a table where 2 girls were waving her over. She sat down. She opened her lunch. She started eating. She was laughing at something one of the girls said before she finished her first bite. Cole stood there for a moment and let that image settle all the way through him, into every place that the last 2 months had carved out. Then he turned and walked back down the corridor with Rex at his heel, and his stride was lighter than it had been in a very long time. 3 months later, Cole co-founded a nonprofit he called Rex's Watch, a program that placed certified canine emotional support teams in schools and community centers, serving children from military and single-parent households. The name was Mara's idea. She had said it simply one evening when he was trying out possible names at the kitchen table. It should be Rex's Watch, because Rex watched when nobody else was watching. He had written it down immediately and not changed it. On the launch day, Mara stood beside him, holding the ceremonial ribbon in both hands, Rex sitting between them in his working vest, and the 3 of them looked like what they were, a family that had been through something real and had come out the other side still standing, closer for the weight of it. Mara cut the ribbon. The crowd applauded. She looked up at Cole, and her face carried the specific brightness of a child who has reclaimed the uncomplicated joy of being exactly where she is. And he looked back at her and felt the specific peace of a man who has finally stopped being far away. Rex looked at both of them with those amber eyes, steady and clear. The eyes of a dog who had known from the first morning what was wrong, and had waited with the patience of an animal that understands that some things cannot be rushed, only trusted, only followed through to the end. A child who was once afraid to eat, afraid to speak, afraid to ask her father for help, had become the reason her school was safer, her community more watchful, and the silence around hurting children a little harder to maintain. And a father who had spent years being brave in every theater except the one that mattered most, had finally learned that the most important post he would ever hold was not across an ocean. It was at the kitchen table, at the dinner table, at the chair beside his daughter's bed at 2 a.m. when she woke up and needed to know he was there. He was there. He was not going anywhere. And that, more than any mission he had ever completed, was the one that counted.